Back in the corral to talk about the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Cowgirls. Garen Emig, the Tulsa World Sports columnist, one of them anyway, along with Eli Letterman, the one and only beat writer covering OSU for us. Doing a great job as always with many interesting things to read, for him to write, for us to read. We'll get into that between now and the end of the show. Thank you very much for tuning in on TulsaWorld.com. Thank you very much for listening if you're catching this in audio podcast form via Google, Apple, or Spotify. Let's start fresh off the pages of the Friday Tulsa World, Eli, and review what you learned from Malcolm Rodriguez as three Oklahoma State Cowboys prepare to go to work at the NFL Combine up in Indianapolis. Catch us up on what Malcolm has been up to.
Yeah, missed you last week, Garen. But, I spoke to Malcolm Rodriguez, who was out in Arizona up until this week, where now he's in Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. And what I learned is that Malcolm, Devin Harper, and kolby-peel, they never left Arizona. We all went out there around Christmas for the Fiesta Bowl, and those guys just stayed. They hung back there. So I spoke to Malcolm. We were getting that chilly weather here. We were frozen over, and he had his feet kicked up at his apartment complex in Phoenix. So he's been working out there with a few guys, and he's at the Combine now, and he'll go tomorrow, Saturday, with the other linebackers. The big thing for him, I mean, there's really two questions hanging over his head as far as NFL scouts go. It's his size and his speed. Mm-hmm. And one of those things he can only do so much about. I wish I was taller. I think he does too. But he can work on his speed, and that's what he's done the past month. And he was telling me about kind of going back to his track and field days from Wagner. He did a season of that with the Bulldogs, and that's what he's hanging his hat on this week. He feels like he can go to Indianapolis and show something with his 40 time, with some of the agility workouts, and he'll get another chance with the pro day here. It's expected on March 24th. But I think, that combine is, you're there for a reason. The entire football world is there. So this is his shot. And it's a chance as well for Jaylen Warren, who's going today on Friday with the running backs, and kolby-peel on Sunday. This is a chance for, three of maybe the more NFL ready, NFL caliber Cowboys to show themselves on a national stage. And I'll say, I think some of us were surprised. Malcolm also surprised that the likes of Devin Harper, Tay Martin, Josh Sills maybe didn't get there. But all of those guys should get their shot here in Stillwater in a few weeks.
The one nugget that I was interested to read was his comparison of the Wonderlic to an SAT, right, in high school, where you take it 4 or 5 times, and then by the end of that run, you hope to have some kind of a mastery of it. I think that's what we consider that a necessary. I think what we've learned is that that's a necessary evil, and you even included a note that some NFL teams don't even see it as necessary any longer, and yet it is on the table. And therefore, it must be dealt with. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it on Malcolm's behalf.
Yeah, I mean, he said he took the ACT about 5 times. I think he and I would have been taking it around the same time, and our approaches were the same, which wasn't let's figure this out. It was let's do it enough times that you just kind of memorize it. It sticks, and you get on with it. And but that was an interesting thing, and it's an interesting thing. I think the whole draft prep process is a lot bigger than everybody thinks. I mean, these facilities,
right?
I think Exos, where he was, that runs you $15,000, $20,000, and I don't know how that works through an agent, but you're getting more than a workout space. You're getting dietitians, you're getting weight rooms, you're around some of the best prospects in the country, and they're putting you more than physical tests. They're doing draft prep interviews. They're putting you through mock Wonderlicks, and it really is a fascinating business. It's a whole lot bigger than just these guys showing up to the combine one week and seeing if they can get, catch the eyes of an NFL scout.
OSU's pro day is later this month, right? What's
expected to be the 24th.
24th. Do we have any idea about spring practice for the current OSU team?
Well, there's nothing officially official from the program. Derek Mason did us the service the other night of tweeting out a schedule, but it sounds like March 22nd and that was the date we'd heard in the coming weeks. So they have not released their official full slate and the whole thing, but sounds like March 22nd should be the first day of spring practice. It's right around OU, I think. It might even be the same day. And then pro day with Malcolm, Jaylen Warren, kolby-peel, and then, I'm sure a whole host of those other guys who aren't at the combine here in Stillwater that day.
I have actually a piece of news based on it. It happened by it accidentally. I was in Oklahoma City yesterday to talk to R.W. McQuarters, the former OSU star who played 8 years, eight I think it was, 8 in the NFL, Booker T. Washington legend from the mid-'90s, of course. And he told me that Rylan, his son, who plays a lot like, or when Rylan was at Booker T just a few years ago, he reminded a lot of viewers, observers of his dad, RW. After being in at the JUCO level, he is popped up at OSU and will be a part of the program.
It was a couple Hornets. You and him cutting it up. I
will keep very good tabs. I told RW if I promise to keep an eye out for him when he isn't. When I say, "Whoa, was that a critter? Was that a critter that just made her debut on the OSU vidcast?" That's
debut.
That would be that would be interesting. I think that was a cat.
I saw it. You didn't.
That's Trixie, the one of the Emick family pets, ladies and gentlemen. She'll be sounding off occasionally as well, especially if she doesn't like anything that Mike Gundy has done. All right, we'll talk about RW again in a little bit. I did want to go back to the current calendar and get to basketball. The Cowboys are done as of tomorrow. We're talking on Friday. They are hosting Texas Tech, and your focus in the story you're putting together is Isaac Likely, correct?
Yeah, spoke with him on Monday, and it sort of his senior day is one of these, and maybe it's a surprise. One of those senior days where you're wondering if we're going to be watching another Isaac Likely senior day next year. Because on Monday he left the door open once again on whether he's going to come back. He said he hasn't given it almost any thought. He sees the pros of maybe coming back. There could be another degree in store for him. Obviously, the Cowboys should be postseason eligible next season. So there's that, but it kind of goes against the line that he maintained preseason and for the early parts of the season. And so I would still maybe lean in my gut that this is it for him, but his senior day tomorrow comes with that question hanging in the air. And I'll be writing today a little bit about, I guess, in the purest form, the people who believed in him. We write so many stories, or so many stories get written. Yeah. A lot of times a little overplayed about the athletes, but nobody who believed in them. Isaac Likely's story is one about all the people who did believe in him to get him here, and kind of how he's recognized that and what he'd like to do in the future whenever his playing days are over. So I've gotten to speak with his family, with his high school coaches, middle school coach, and got a pretty cool artifact from an 8th grade Isaac Likely that you'll be able to find on the pages of the friendly neighborhood Tulsa World.
Well, I'll be sure to check that out. He's an interesting guy on an interesting team, right? I mean, there are a lot of good what we like to. Well, that's literally what they do when we talk to them is they talk to us. We call them good talkers. It's not just players, but how they express themselves. And I've always gotten. I've had a lot of admiration for the guys that Mike Boynton has brought to the program, not just as players, of course, but the guys who are willing and open about expressing themselves, and Likely certainly falls in that vein. I'll be curious what kind of response we get. I'll be joining you at the game tomorrow, Eli. I'll be curious to find out how players and Boynton approach the postseason. I assume they're going to. My guess is they're going to say they're not going to pay much attention to it. Mm-hmm. And then my guess is that they actually will when it comes down to it. Would that be?
That probably seems accurate. But I think in the nearer term, even it bears wondering what tomorrow is going to look like. Again, this finale, this is the 30th game they've played, and it's probably the 30th time I'll go into a game this season wondering what Oklahoma State team we're going to see.
Yeah.
And they've got, the 12th ranked Red Raiders coming in. But I think a chance to go 500 and finish that way would be quite a way to go. But I think I side with you on the whole that I'm sure the attitude will be to stiff arm the postseason and watching, but knowing simply just how I've talked basketball with these guys all year. They love to sit back and watch basketball when they're not playing it. And I think it's going to be hard to stay away.
Then, by the way, it's still Oklahoma State fans, and I've heard a few of them just driving around Tulsa this week on Sports Talk Radio, miffed that there's no Big 12 tournament, at least, as I understand. And again, being places, sometimes you run into folks you don't expect to see. I talked to a couple of OSU athletic officials at that Hall of Fame lunch in which RW was a part, as well as Leroy Smith from the Smith wrestling dynasty. There were a couple of OSU officials in attendance, and the word I got from them was the language of the ruling made it pretty clear that there was no opportunity for OSU to play in the Big 12 basketball tournament. There might have been a statement at one time from Bob Bowlesby that they think, or maybe out of from the program in Stillwater, I can't remember which, Eli, but that gave fans hope that there might be an avenue for the school to pursue. But I don't think that was ever in the cards, at least as I understand it, for what it's worth.
Yeah, that came the day of, or I guess the decision arrived November 2nd. We learned about it on the 3rd. And that day, Bob Bowlesby released a statement, saying that, current conference bylaws say this, that a team banned from the postseason by the NCAA can't play an ARB tournament, but that they'd consider it in extraordinary circumstances. And so that did open the door, maybe delivered, I think, some false hope, because on the whole, what they cited was what they had the day they released that statement. They looked at the NCAA ruling and basically made the call off of that. And so there's probably plenty of folks who feel that would be harsh. I think the conversation might be different if it was a 20-10 Oklahoma State team and not right now 14-15 group. But they close it out here tomorrow. And I think, I've gone on the radio all week, been writing all week about this group. And the fact that they're here, I think, with a chance to go 500 tomorrow, having just gone on the road to beat an Iowa State team that has postseason aspirations, it's about as well as it could have gone, and a credit to this group that they've hung on. Because as much as you could look at it and say, man, maybe they'd be 20-10 and going to the postseason, they could very easily be 10-20, and the wheels really could have come off. And I think there was a point not that long ago where we thought the wheels might come off. That Mike Boynton press conference after Florida, where he just he told it to us, but he was talking to his players, telling them to let this go and make something out of this last month. And the wins and losses maybe haven't been, that record hasn't been the prettiest, but they've certainly done that. So I think it's been a strong finish for the Cowboys. I
mentioned Leroy Smith. That should be a segue into Big 12 wrestling. That's in Tulsa, down at the BOK Center all weekend, where John Smith has to get the Cowboys in position to defend their annual title. It's interesting. I did one of these episodes with Bill Haston, fellow columnist and friend of the show's. And without even getting into details as to the setup of the tournament, I think they were just announcing seeds at the time. We sort of hit it and then passed by it because it's such a given that OSU is going to win the thing, right? And so we called it sort of standard operating procedure, I think, for lack of a better term. The more you look at it, the more you do review OSU season. And wrestling listeners know this already. This is for those of us who just don't hit the sport as hard as they should. This isn't standard operating procedure this weekend for the OSU wrestling program. They are up against it in terms of defending their annual title. Yeah, no, this is probably it's 9 straight years they've gone. Has it been in Tulsa all those 9 years? Most of them. Wherever it's been. If not almost. I think close. Well, here's the thing. It hasn't mattered where they've done it. Oklahoma State has, for the last 9 years, gone down there and at least come away with a share of the title. And they're very aware of that. The rest of the conference is very aware of that. And everyone's aware that this year it's not that same given. I think depends on what you look at, but they go here as not the prohibitive favorite. Iowa State is right there at the very top of the conference. And that's one thing John Smith spoke to this week, that and he thinks it's a healthy thing. The conference itself has gotten a lot better. And that's one piece of the equation this weekend as to why the Cowboys are not favorites. But the other end of it is that this season has been, a relative, and that's an important term, relative, because I think a lot of wrestling programs around the country would kill to be in the spot that the Cowboys are in, 12-4. That's a good record. But John Smith said this week, they hold themselves to a higher standard than this year. Right. Losing AJ Ferrari in January, they've had a few other injuries, and they're just not, at least on the team level, at that same caliber. And it's going to take, I think John Smith called it some crazy work for them to go there this weekend and make it 10, which makes it all the more compelling. And you do have some individuals. I mean, Dustin Plott, Dayton Fix, those are guys individually who can get some individual titles, but really
are going to not just need to win. It's not, I don't think it'll be enough for them as a team for Dayton Fix to win. He needs to rack up bonus points and dominate to make up for kind of what they're lacking in some of those other spots. And so maybe one of the more interesting weekends of wrestling in Tulsa in first weekend of March that we've had in a while.
Is it time to start giving the baseball program a little bit more airtime?
I think so. It's funny. It was last weekend here. We're coming right out of the freeze, and you get one game canceled, the next game canceled, and it just felt like their season was just start, stop, start, stop. But each of their last 3 games, I mean, they've won 4 straight. Each of the last 3, they've been the come from behind Cowboys. They scored 4 runs in the 9th and another in the 10th to beat Wright State on Sunday night, sweep that doubleheader. And then they went to the desert and played Arizona State, and 2 days in a row came from behind. On Wednesday, it was 7 RBI from Caden Trinkle, and now they come home 6-2, 4th in the country. It's probably about as good a start as you could have asked for if you were Josh Holliday.
Very cool. You put the plug in for your likely story that's coming up. Before we get out of here, I'll go ahead and shamelessly do the same for the McQuarters column that I am putting on the shelf until I think early next week. Had a really nice chat with him in Oklahoma City yesterday. He looks, I think he said he was 46, 45 maybe. He looks early 30s, man. He is fit still. It was really cool to see him humbled by, it wasn't enshrined. That won't come until I believe August, but he was introduced essentially alongside the rest of the class, included Leroy Smith and former Oklahoma football great Tinker Owens. But it was cool. It was cool to see him. Again, just period. I don't know if I've talked to him face to face ever, despite our allegiance to Booker T and the fact that I was writing when he was still playing at one time. But it was also hearing him reflect on his time both as a Hornet and a Cowboy in the 90s, the success that he had under several coaches, the difficulty he had under one legendary coach at OSU, Eddie Sutton. 2 of them, let's just say the 2 of them didn't exactly see eye to eye, which is, you don't often hear of a former Sutton player admit that. But it was a very interesting conversation. Anyway, the crux of the column will be sort of arriving like a lot of star athletes do later in life, at peace with their career, because he took a few interesting turns, not just getting from Booker T to Oklahoma State with the controversy over did he not go to OU because Howard Schellenberger really told him to take his hat off when he was being recruited, to the NFL, where he was first round pick of the Niners, but didn't play there very long, to even some things post-career. So I'm looking forward to writing that, and I think it'll be a really good read for OSU fans with nods both to McQuarters as well as Mike Gundy, who was very prominent in RW's comments yesterday, someone that was a big factor in him going to OSU in the first place. So look forward to writing about a fellow Hornet. Hopefully a lot of readers will look forward to checking out what he had to say. All right, Eli, that does it for the week. I guess we'll see you tomorrow at at
Gallagher Ave, and I'll add a note on McQuarters. You've got his son joining the program, and you've got 2 sons of another former Cowboy, Elijah and Solomon Wright, sons of Kenyatta Wright. So there's a bit of a legacy play coming in this offseason that should be fun to cover. But yes, tomorrow.
Yes, be at basketball. Gundy has spoken repeatedly about building a stronger pipeline to alumni and maybe mending some fences that have been broken too long with regard to oversight. I think that's fair to say. When it comes to former players, maybe the fact that you've got a McQuarters and a couple of Wrights on the roster will help that process along. So we'll see. Anyway, good to see you again, man. We'll talk next week. Thank you very much for tuning in on TulsaWorld.com and for listening via Google, Apple, and Spotify. Have a good week, folks. Enjoy the weather while it's here and stay warm when the cold returns next week.